Nick, welcome to 500 Firms. I have Nick Paley. He's a private wealth management summer analyst for Goldman Sachs. He's basically going to discuss how he was able to get in. He's a current junior at Ohio State in finance. So, Nick, let's start things off. Why Goldman Sachs for you?
So basically, I feel like I might have like a unique reason as to why. So I'm a part of a Fisher Futures investment banking program here at Ohio State, and a part of that program, we're able to go visit New York and Chicago and tour some of the big banks. And Goldman Sachs was one of the banks that we toured. And just when I was there, I really just connected with the culture that they had. I mean, it also has that prestigious name with it, so that was an attractive factor for me when I started looking into internships. I mean, it would be a good place to kind of jumpstart my career, but really, once you dig more into the details of the companies that you are applying for, you learn a lot from the employees about why they love it there. And what stuck out to me was they really want you to do stuff that you're passionate in. They put a strong emphasis on if you want to transfer for divisions, they make it feasible to do so. And I thought that was really incredible because everyone watching this, myself included, we're all young 20-year-olds that really don't know what we want to do with our life, even if we think we do. I mean, I guarantee what we do after we graduate will not be the same as what we do in 20 years. So the fact that they are willing to sit down and really find out what your niche is within the firm, I found that to be very attractive.
So they kind of went above and beyond in theory. Not only did they have a big name, but it's really about setting you up for success in your future as well. Yeah, that's critical. Now, you didn't start in finance, if I remember correctly. You started out as a marketing major when you went into OSU. How did you segue from marketing into finance?
Yeah, that's right. So I came into Ohio State as a marketing major. So if you're watching this and unsure about what you want to do at Ohio State, what you want to study, it's okay. Plenty of people switch majors throughout their time here. Basically, I didn't know much about finance coming in because my high school didn't really have many finance programs. So it was all kind of foreign to me. So I just said marketing because I enjoyed working with people. But the more I got involved in Fisher, the more people I met that were finance majors, and that just kind of sparked my interest. I always thought the stock market was kind of a cool thing to really study. And being around other people that also had that similar interest really kind of pushed me to do my own research, Google articles, watch YouTube videos about what a career in finance might look like. And that kind of spurred me to get involved on campus with organizations such as the investment banking program that inform freshmen about what careers in finance would look like. So it was about the end of my freshman year, I decided to make the switch from marketing to finance because finance really does embody a lot of the personal factors of marketing, but it's also more interesting to me in the sense that you get to study the world markets, study current events, and just things that affect the overall global economy.
So you were part of a club called Investment. What was it again?
So the club was the investment banking program. So that's open to all freshmen. You don't have to apply or anything. It's really, you get to go sit there and listen to students at Ohio State that are going to be working in the financial sector speak.
Got it. What were some of the key nuggets that you learned from joining that club?
Well, I learned that investment banking is not what I want to do. So that was kind of another beneficial thing. Try to expose yourself to many different career paths because even if you don't learn what you want to do, you might learn what you don't want to do. I came into the investment banking program thinking that investment banking was really just portfolio management, so like investing in stocks and stuff for clients. Just I want to do personally and what this role that I'll be working in the summer is. So really that's why I got involved in the program, but it taught me more. Investment banking really kind of embodies all of finance. So
Okay.
it was a place to get started because, I mean, you learn a lot of the other career paths and industry within finance.
So then why private wealth for you? I mean, it sounds like there's multiple areas of focus. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. So my private wealth division is under the investment management division at Goldman Sachs. Basically within that, there's private wealth management, which is where I'll be working with. That pretty much means investing money for high net worth individuals. And then there's the asset management side. So that's when you invest money for institutional investors. So like large pension funds, hedge funds, they'll give the firm their money to invest on behalf of their clients. And I chose to kind of focus more on private wealth management because there wasn't really that middleman. It will be me working with that client itself, which I find to be an attractive factor. I like working with people, and I think that's great to make connections, and I think it's something I enjoy more.
If you were to be successful in this role, what would be the end goal for you, in your opinion?
Personally, I want to kind of get into more of the hedge fund side of finance. So that would be managing money for both wealthy individuals as well as institutional investors. So think about it as kind of combining private wealth and asset management together. Really, that just would be a role within portfolio management. So basically, I would buy stocks, bonds, whatever the individual wanted to invest in or whatever the firm that I was working for thought would be good investment opportunities. Just invest in those on behalf of our clients to try to beat the market returns. And that's something that I find exciting and something that I think I'm interested in.
So how did you find out about the position, but more of like this is something that you want to do? Like how did you set yourself up for success during your freshman, sophomore years before you went to junior, where it's like, this could be something that could be of interest to me?
Definitely getting involved on campus helped out extremely. I was a part of the Fisher Futures Investment Banking Program, which is an organization here on campus that you apply to in the fall of your sophomore year. And it's just another organization that really focuses on teaching the students about investment banking. On top of that, I'm in Buckeye Capital Investors, which is kind of like a stock pitching club here on campus. So those two coupled with each other, I was able to be surrounded by other individuals who were interested in careers in finance and kind of spitball ideas of career paths off one another. And that helped me to narrow down that I didn't want to do banking. I wanted to do stuff that was more following the markets.
Okay.
So that kind of helped me narrow it down. And then outside of the classroom, outside of student organizations, a lot of this is in finance is taking it on yourself to do. So for me personally, I've started reading the Wall Street Journal like my first semester sophomore year, which I recommend if you're interested in finance. So probably start around that time period once you kind of have a better understanding for the world. That definitely helps you just prepare in the long run because a lot of the stuff you'll be asked in interviews will pertain to current events. And also, if you want to work in finance, it'll help you learn if you're passionate about current events in the economy. Because if you can't sit down and read the paper a few times a week or every day and don't feel any interest in it, then maybe you don't want to work in finance. So it kind of helps you figure out where you want to go with your career.
No, that's interesting. I think not only that, it also makes you current. If you look at the landscape of competition, what shows passion is the investment that you made. Now, you mentioned the Wall Street Journal. If I remember correctly, I mean, it's pretty expensive. Like, how are you able to swing that?
So actually, I mean, being a student now is the best time to take up these subscription services because they offer extreme student discounts. Like when I started, it was like $1 for 15 weeks for the subscription online. And I'm pretty sure it's still like only $10 as a full-time student. So it's a great deal, especially because once you're in the real world, it'll probably be about like 35 or 40. So I recommend just doing it now while you can to take advantage of that discount for sure.
And then reading it daily, I assume, as well, because that's where you get your key insight.
Yeah, so my strategy recently, I just started off doing the online version only, which it's more so on yourself to stay up to date on it. But then I switched to the print version last semester. So basically every morning, like at my apartment downstairs, the paper will be waiting for me. And basically, I mean, this makes you kind of feel guilty if you don't read it because you just walk by it and it's just sitting there and you're like, well, I'm paying X amount of dollars for this. I really should probably do this. Sit down and read it for like half an hour. I mean, even if it's a busy day, breeze through the headlines real quick. You're definitely ahead of people who aren't doing it. So, I mean, it really helps out. Thought that was kind of like an interesting piece of information that I've been benefiting from is reading the physical copy of the Wall Street Journal.
The print version, you still get the student discount?
It may be a little more expensive. I'm not too sure. I'd have to double check. But I mean, either way, you're going to get the same knowledge from the online version as well. And it's a little more accessible, obviously. You can read it in class. You can read it wherever you want, really.
Got it. Cool. So how and when did you apply for this position at Goldman Sachs?
So for this position specifically, I applied in, I believe, July. However, the application process for looking for an internship for this coming summer really started probably around May for me, earlier for some of my other classmates. But yeah, so I applied in July, and then the process going forward, probably I interviewed and ended up getting the position in October. It was a 3-month process or so, however much it would be.
Got it. So right now we're recording it and we're in April. So we're talking like a year ago to about 9 months ago is when you actually applied for the position.
Yeah.
I think you also mentioned in our previous conversation, it's rolling, but from my understanding, a lot of the big companies, they like it a year to 9 months in advance for the application to be put into play. Let's discuss, how did you prepare? So meaning, was it you just put together your resume and then you immediately applied, or what was your game plan?
So definitely getting your resume together is very crucial. I recommend probably by the second semester of your sophomore year, really having a solid template down. For anyone interested in finance, if you Google Fisher Futures resumes, it goes to an Ohio State link that shows my Fisher Futures class and the classes before me. All of our resumes, which like we have faculty members nitpick and make sure that they're up to the standards of what you're going to see in the financial world. So definitely taking initiative on that to organize all your involvements and accomplishments. And then, like I mentioned earlier, like reading the paper every day, starting sophomore year of college. Really, because I mean, you're going to be preparing yourself for an interview that took place a year out. Because I mean, you draw upon all the current events that you've ever read about, really, because they always compound off one another. Like I mean, you start reading about the trade wars with China and the United States back in February of like last year, and I mean, I mentioned that in my interview in October. So definitely do things on your own, stay up to date on the economy is very crucial.
Perfect. So Nick, tell me, what does the interview process look like?
Okay, so yeah, as I mentioned previously, so I applied in, I believe, July. A month after that, I believe they kind of just like take all the resumes, screen them, filter it down, and they send out a high review interview. So basically, this is kind of the initial round that a lot of the big firms do nowadays. It's somewhat like a video interview. However, there's going to be no person on the other side talking to you. It's really going to be, you'll go to the website, you'll press start, and then a question will pop up on the screen, and you'll have about a minute or two to read over the question, formulate your response, and then it starts automatically recording, and you have a minute or two to answer the question. So this is very common with all the financial firms like JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley. I did other ones for them. So basically, it was probably about 3 to 5 questions. And then after that, it took about a month to hear back from them then. So now keep in mind, it's probably the last week of September. I did the hire review late August. And I got a week from the day I received the email that I was going to get flown into their Chicago office for a super day, which in finance, that's like kind of the main interview day where you sit down and interview with multiple people. So I had a week to prepare for that, which was definitely kind of the most intense preparation cycle. Because I mean, it's pretty short notice, just so like, you have a week to really learn everything about the position, because the past month I hadn't really been thinking about it, because you apply to so many internships during this point of your student career. So basically, once I found out about the position, I started doing a lot of online research. I really recommend Wall Street Oasis and Glassdoor. Wall Street Oasis is an online forum, everything finance pretty much, and you can find a whole bunch of discussion posts about the interview process for various roles at these banks. And then Glassdoor also has a similar setup where you can search a position and then you can scroll down and find the interview question that the other people were asked. So I looked and compiled a list of all the interview questions on Glassdoor, on Wall Street Oasis, and really wrote out my ideal responses to these questions so I'd be prepared for them. So that was kind of my preparation leading up to the week before. Keep in mind, some of these questions did pertain to current events, so I did make sure to brush up again on what was happening in the world, have at least 2 or 3 companies I could talk about, 2 or 3 economic events I could talk about in depth, and it ended up I was eventually asked those questions. But then fast forward to the actual super day. Basically, it was from 8 a.m. to noon. It was 5 one-on-one 30-minute interviews. So basically, I'd interview for half an hour break, just sitting in the room that I was being interviewed in, wait for the next person to come in. So once that day was all wrapped up, they pretty much let you know, okay, we'll be in touch probably about 2 weeks out from this date, letting you know if I received the offer for the position or not. I should mention, after that day was over, I did write thank you letters to all the people that you interview with. Typically they'll give you their business card. If not, definitely initially ask what their email is at the end of it. Typically it's the same for everyone. Most people's, it's their first name dot last name at gs.com. Pretty standard across the board with a lot of these banks and a lot of companies in general. So that was definitely crucial. I think helps set a lot of people apart, because no one really thinks that to keep on working for the position after the interviews end. But it also shows, you appreciate them. They're taking half an hour of their time to do this for you. And then after that day, I found out that I got the offer about 2 days after that. So a little bit earlier than 2 weeks, which I think was definitely a good sign when I got the call, because you don't know going into it if it's going to be good news or bad news.
Yep.
But really, if you don't hear back right away, don't be worried either, because I've had plenty of friends that hear back kind of at the latter end of that 2-week period, received offers. So I think it's kind of an irrelevant fact, but that's just when I found out personally.
Got it. Interesting. So how soon did you send the thank you letters?
Really immediately. I went back to my hotel. I had about 4 hours until I had to leave for the airport. So I sat down and got lunch somewhere. And then I had 5 emails. They were all pretty similar. They're very standardized, but definitely make sure you personalize them a little bit. Talk about cool things you talked about. One of the guys I connected with really well, we talked for about 10 minutes about some history documentary on Netflix. As my resume, I have my interests, and one of them is history, and he was a history nerd as well. So we just talked about that, and definitely mentioned on my email, I can't wait to check out this documentary. Just really trying to make it personal, but obviously, the general theme of it is not to be thanking them for their time.
No, fantastic. Do you remember a question that was asked during your interview process that stands out?
For this role specifically, many of these interviews, it's going to be a lot of behavioral questions about how you reacted to certain situations. The one that I thought was the most interesting for me, because it is what I want to do, is if you had $1 million in a portfolio, how would you allocate it? That was probably the most interesting question I received.
And how did you answer it?
So I kind of knew going in that there was a possibility I'd be asked that, just because of those Glassdoor and Wall Street Oasis articles I read. So basically, what I found to be pretty helpful with these interviews is if they ask you a question that is kind of vague in the response, ask questions back, kind of narrow down what they're looking for. So I asked, well, what type of investor am I? Am I a middle-aged investor, like most of their clients probably are, or am I myself? So they're like, oh, it's just taking the perspective of a middle-aged investor, like one of our clients. So I kind of, knew that going in, so a little bit of a cheat. But I started off by saying, well, since you're at this stage in your life, you're getting towards your retirement, you're probably going to be less risky in your asset allocation. So that means probably going to be heavily weighted in bonds or fixed income. So I said about 40% of your portfolio should be allocated to that, because You'll learn in your finance classes, bonds are less risky than equities because there's less systemic risk involved with them. And then so about 40% in bonds, then I said 30% or 40% in equities. In this, probably 20 to 30% of it would be more allocated towards safer investments, like US blue chip stocks, think Apple, Microsoft, companies are going to be around a decade from now. And then kind of the other portion of that equity investment would be more risky equities. You can invest in some Chinese stocks, because they generate higher returns because they're in emerging markets, which receive more investment from developed nations than a developed nation company typically does. After that, I think I touched upon a bit of like inflation protection, which is something I wasn't too familiar with going into the interview, but because I did the preparation to look into what ideal asset allocation looked like, I learned about how important it is to help these investors hedge against inflation, which if none of what I just said makes sense to you, don't worry, you'll learn about it in your finance classes. So, gold is a well-known inflation hedge, as well as TIPS, which are a form of government bond that kind of adds an inflation premium to the rate of return. So that kind of really rounded out the whole portfolio that I had envisioned. But yeah, definitely if I didn't research that prior to, I would have been extremely caught off guard and probably wouldn't have had as good of response to it as I believe I did.
I think the silver lining is when they ask a question, respond and let's identify who's because at the end of the day it's so identifying who the customer is, and then once you identify who the customer is, and then start thinking about the whole thought process, because even though you're right or wrong, I don't think it really matters. It's just the fact that you're thinking in every single direction, and then the idea is you'll grow, and then they know where you're weak or they know where you're strong, but they know where you're at, and I think that's the most important thing. And then moving forward, yeah, that's cool. That's real cool. So did you mention you actually acquired some mentors throughout this process as well?
Yeah, definitely. So definitely a crucial part in this stage of your college career is to start being comfortable with networking. I know for me, it was something that I really didn't get too comfortable with till closer to my junior year. And in hindsight, I wish I was more ambitious and stepping out of my comfort zone earlier. But through a couple of the programs at Ohio State that I'm in, one of them is the Honors Finance cohort, which is basically apply as a sophomore second semester, and it's something you're involved in your junior and senior year. Or basically you just take honors courses with a smaller group of classmates compared to the typical size of a Fisher class with upper level faculty. Through that program, we were introduced to one of my mentors, who's also an Ohio State grad, which you'll see as a theme with my mentors. And then another one is through the CFA Society of Columbus, which CFA is basically a certified financial analyst, just a designation you can strive to achieve that lets people know that you know what you're talking about in finance pretty much. And he was also an Ohio State alum. And so those two people have been very beneficial to me, especially this past 2 semesters. One of them is based in Columbus. Once a month, reach out to him to set up a lunch date sometime in the week. They're usually very willing to comply because, really these mentors, they want to give back to you. They were once in your shoes as well. That's why reaching out to Ohio State alumni is probably the way to go when it comes to trying to find these mentors, whether it be on LinkedIn or through your student organizations, because they want to help you get ahead. Because finance, coming from Ohio State, is extremely competitive because these banks for years and years have always looked at their Ivy League students as top notch. So to be able to kind of infiltrate the ranks as some Big Ten schools is a little difficult. So having someone that's inside those firms as an advocate for you, who is once used, can make a world of difference.
No, real cool. It sounds like the silver lining is identifying mentors that actually went to your school, because then therefore it's much easier because they were, of course, in your shoes, I think statistically speaking. And then not only that, I think the other keynote here is when they do become your mentor, whether they know it or not, I think the idea is meet with them once a month. So therefore, it's not too much of a time commitment. Now, when you meet with them once a month, do you spend 30 minutes of their time, an hour of their time? What?
I think it starts off, well, it depends if it's in person or a phone call. A phone call, you're probably going to be talking about 30 minutes or so. Probably a little more towards the beginning just to get to know them well, but then kind of tapers off because eventually these relationships are going to be very informal. Most of the times, you're just going to be catching up on how their day's going, how life's been really. Because if you can structure those personal relationships, then you can ask them tough professional questions later on down the road and it won't feel forced or awkward. But with in person, usually, grab lunch about an hour, hour and a half. It's a typical time frame. But yeah, definitely, that whole time you're not just talking about finance or talking about stocks or anything. You're getting to know them. And that's what business is about, is really just getting to know people on a personal, deeper level so that when the time comes, you can ask them questions pertaining to the professional world.
No, really cool. What is the best advice you actually received from your mentors, in your opinion?
I think so far, a lot of the questions I've been asking are about how to excel this summer within my role. because I mean, obviously, typically, if you get an internship that you enjoy, is to get return offer by the end of the summer. So really, I mean, that's a kind of like a nagging thing in the back of my mind. Is like, oh man, what do I got to do to get a return offer? For sure, everyone thinks about, but really, I mean, all the advice that I've been given is like, try to put that aside, because if you're going to be focusing on that, you're going to be comparing yourself to how your peers are performing, and like that can breed jealousy or like envy, or just it won't breed the type of emotions and attributes that you need to excel as a team, which
Yeah.
is a big emphasis. You want to think of yourself as a part of a team. You're not competing to get a role. You're competing to help the firm excel in whatever project you're working on. So basically, that's what I'm trying to go in with the mindset as. I want to make sure that when I'm working on these projects, I'm thinking about what me and my team can do to make sure that we're excelling at the project at hand. Then what my mentors have told me is like, think about how to go above and beyond that. Think about what the next steps that your manager or superior is going to want from you, but they didn't necessarily tell you that yet. Like, so you accomplish the project, whatever the goal was. You know, if you have an extra 15, 20 minutes or just any spare time, start thinking about what it is you could do next to further advance the process of the project. So when you bring it to that superior, you can say, here's what you asked for, but here's what I think that we should potentially do as the next following steps. And I mean, even if you're totally wrong, they're going to really appreciate the fact that you put in the time and energy to really go above and beyond.
Did you ever ask them and if you didn't, it's okay. Did you ever ask your mentors what they did? Like how they went above and beyond?
Yeah, I asked a couple of them, and that's kind of where I got that kind of response. Is like, well, I really just did what really I thought the managers wanted me to do, but they didn't necessarily tell me. Or one of them I thought was pretty cool was it wasn't even a project he was working on. It was a project that his manager was working on. And she ended up getting called into a meeting late at night, and like she was not able to work on the project. And he could tell how stressed she had been about it for the past week, and he really didn't have anything else going on. So he asked for her permission to like, grab a copy of the Excel file. So he did that, and like he started working on it and seeing what he could do to help like, advance the process. And I mean, at the end of the day, he did a lot of great work that the individual as manager really appreciated. I'm almost positive that obviously looks very good that you're going to help out someone even when it's not pertaining to what you're working on at the time.
Yeah, help others with the idea they'll help you in the long run. That's huge. These connections are amazing. Nick, I
Mhm.
really want to thank you for your time. This was fantastic. Best of luck this summer, and I think you have the right mindset. Just make it a full time once you're done. And if you need anything, just reach back out. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Like, go Bucks.